residents of Gauteng reported feeling an earth tremor at about 6:30 this morning. People from as far afield as Northcliff, Germiston and Boksburg say they felt the ground shake for a few seconds. Joining me now to explain why tremors occur is seismologist Michelle Grobbelaar. Ms. Grobbelaar, good to have you with us this afternoon. So perhaps let's start with the fact that Gauteng actually experiences quite a number of traumas. We've had 6 in the past month or so. Why?
Hi, good afternoon, and thanks for inviting me. So we've been experiencing earthquakes for a number of years. And it's something that we've always had in the past, and that's why the rule of thumb is if we've had it in the past, we can expect it in the future again. Excuse me. Yes, please go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
So basically, yes. So that's something that we've been monitoring for a number of years now. And it's, we've, for instance, I was saying the one day to another reporter that on a weekly basis throughout the country, we actually monitor about 170 events across the country. So, that's something that we've always been aware of.
And are these tremors unique to urban areas, or are they also experienced in more rural settings?
It really depends. I like to, just like across the world, you have areas which experience earthquakes more than other areas. Just like in South Africa, you do have these what you could call hotspots, these areas where you do get more earthquakes than in the past, in other areas, excuse me. So it's not necessarily if it's urban and rural areas. It depends on the geology of the area and across, where you are in the country.
And talk to us about those specific dynamics that impact the occurrence of tremors. For example, 90% of tremors were actually experienced in the West Rand.
Yes, no, we are lucky in South Africa in that we are what they call an intraplate area, so we're not close to plate boundaries. So we do experience low to moderate seismicity, and this is what this means is that we do get the odd biggish one, but generally we've got a lot of small ones. But a lot of our seismicity we locate in the mining regions, as you quite rightly mentioned. So this is something that we've always been monitoring, and we have a national network of seismograph stations throughout the country that works 24/7 in monitoring these events.
Are tremors anything to be concerned about?
Oh, that's always a tough question. Rule of thumb, well, what I like to say is if you feel threatened, you should take the necessary precautions, because you can get a smallish event, like a 3.5, but the way that your house reacts to it could be different from your neighbor because of the geology that it's built on or the way it's built. So you should not panic, that is for sure, but you should at least be aware. And if you feel that you are concerned about what's going on, that you feel that something could fall on your head, then you should go under something that's a bit more stronger, so to protect yourself until the shaking's finished. Or if you're outside, stand away from something that could fall on top of you. So it's very difficult to say don't worry. Rather, just be aware of it and don't panic.
Have there been instances in South Africa where we've had tremors that have had disastrous effects and consequences?
Yeah, no, certainly. Our biggest earthquake was in 1969 in the Ceres Tulbagh region. It was a magnitude 6.3, and that did cause a lot of fatalities, unfortunately, as well as a lot of infrastructural damage. And then, of course, we've had a number of biggish mining events, mining events that are in the mining regions. For instance, the 2014 event, magnitude 5.5, and if you can remember, that also damaged a lot of houses and a lot of buildings.
Is there any way that one can perhaps try and safeguard them from tremors that might be disastrous?
The buildings?
Yes, or yourself?
Yes, no, certainly. In places like your high seismically active countries, you definitely do have building codes that the engineers, the civil engineers, they need to design the buildings to withstand certain movements. You do get a lot of these infrastructures. They determine when they're developing it or they drafting it. They look at what kind of magnitude you can expect in that area, and then they design that building to withstand that kind of magnitude earthquake. So that's the sort of thing that the engineers look at when they design the infrastructure, especially your more sensitive infrastructures. And then, of course, if you're living in your building, like I mentioned earlier, to get above or get underneath something that can protect your head.
Now, as we wrap up this afternoon, let's go back to the tremor that was experienced in the early hours of this morning. Do we know the cause of that and where it originated from?
That is a tough one to answer. It requires a lot more geological investigations, on-site investigations. We need to then try and see if there's any fault that was related to that, because a lot of the time, how an earthquake is created is that the stresses build up inside the earth and it just needs to get released. And that sudden release, usually along a weakness in a rock, that's what we feel, is that shaking, that sudden release along the weakness in the rock. So to be able to identify what actually caused it, one needs to actually go on the ground, try and see if there's any particular fault around there that we can associate it with. So it's a lot of more research that needs to look into that to be able to pinpoint exactly what caused that earthquake.
Ms. Michelle Grobbelaar, thank you very much for your time and your insight this afternoon. She's Michelle Grobbelaar, and she is from the Council for Geoscience.